2025 has finally arrived, and Smith and Grezzy are back recording our first podcast with the one and only Sam Harrison from the Elland Youth Band organisation. So welcome, Sam.
Thanks, Al.
Good. So this week we're going to talk about Sam's involvement mainly with the Elland Youth Band and basically pick some brains of a very talented young lady that, you know, we want to try and help people with a bit of guidance, setting up youth bands, and obviously try and get this lineage of players coming through to all sections of bands. So how did you actually start playing, Sam? How did you get your first interest?
So my interest really comes through my family. Both my mum, granddad, auntie, uncle were all brass banders. My granddad and my great granddad was a brass bander. He played with Brighouse and Rastrick. He was a tuba player, bass player. And then my granddad followed in his footsteps, and my mum and my uncle also took up the instrument. So when I was 7, I think I got handed a letter at school to ask if I wanted to play the violin. And I brought that letter home, and it was like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to start brass. And at that time, my mum and granddad and family weren't sort of involved with Elland Band at that time. They'd taken time out because my mum had a family. Yeah. So yeah. I started, and they took me down to Elland Band. And when I went down, I got handed a tenor horn on my first night, which I wasn't too impressed with. I got handed a tenor horn, and the band had about 7 or 8 players, and it was in a bit of a mess actually. It was Elland Band back then, so yeah. So that's where it all started.
And did that sort of, you know, because when you say they're in a bit of a mess, I think you mean struggling for players.
Yeah.
And is that what spawned the idea of a youth band eventually?
Yeah, I mean, the band had hit hard times. Financially, they did hard times. They were struggling for players, and they were virtually on the points of wrapping up. And I joined at that time, and the people running the band had sort of pulled an emergency meeting together to say, with no money, the band room was leaking, it was in a mess, and it was more or less going to fold. So my mum and my granddad said, well, you know, we've had a long history with this band over the years in the past. Let's see if we can help. So that's where it started. And they found a new conductor, somebody that lived locally that could come and teach and just start teaching with anybody who wanted to come and just try and regrow the band, really. Yeah.
Wonderful. So obviously your family have had a long history and you've carried it on. Now, what year was the youth band officially founded?
So 1995.
Right.
Sam, can I ask how, when you were looking initially for players, how did you go about it?
When we started the youth band, so I mean, it was one of those things. It sort of happened. I was at Huddersfield University. I was sort of 19. I had a bit of an interest in trying to teach and doing a few kids. So we started with we put an advert out locally, and a few children from the local area came. We started doing lessons, and word of mouth sort of spread, and we got a few more kids. And so we just started with nothing. We started with absolute beginners. It was a complete learning curve for me and for those children. I was just 19. I was just a young lass that had an interest and had lots of information, lots of worksheets that had been given to me over the years. And we just started teaching learners from the beginning.
So you had a supply of instruments then. There were instruments available.
Yeah, so I mean, as Elland Band had sort of built itself up and started contesting in the 4th section, the band had fundraised, and they'd purchase a new instrument and keep the old one, and purchase a new one and keep the old one. So we had sort of a core set of rusty instruments that we started these children off with. And then, of course, we were at the time where the lottery grants were coming out. So we were really, really fortunate to receive a lottery grant in 1996. So that enabled the main band to have a full set of instruments, many of which we're still using today. You know, we got a full set of instruments, full set of percussion instruments, and then we were able to put those instruments that the main band had been playing, we recycled them and put them into use with the kids, you see.
So the timing for that was impeccable.
Yeah, I mean, it was a catalyst really, and it was things came together at the right time for us, and we were able to access that money to help us to build on what we'd already started. But we didn't start our youth band with an advert for children that could play at grade 5. We didn't start there. We started with absolute nothing. Come and see what you can do, and we will develop that talent. And that's how I'd learn. And we've always had. I think it came from Jack Harrison or John Harrison, who was sort of he's not related to me, but he was sort of the main man that sort of put a lot of time into me and helped me to develop. And he was all for, we grow our own talent. You know, players aren't there, so we've got to find our own. We've got to make our own. If we don't have a soprano player, we take somebody on one side, we give them lessons, we teach them to be that person, you know, because bands, even back then, even 30 years ago, bands were struggling for players, and we had to grow our own, you know.
Is that John Harrison, who used to be the MD of Crossley's Carpet Works?
Yeah.
John, wow. I think it's the same John Harrison. He came up to Whitburn when I was a kid. Yeah. And did a bit of work. And he was proper. I mean, it's a sort of slightly vague memory, but this is sort of mid-70s time. And he was proper old school. Yeah. You know, sort of Yorkshire, Lancashire bandmaster type material, wasn't he? Yeah. You know, he knew his stuff, and he knew.
He was just a wonderful gentleman. Yeah.
He was, yeah. He used to come up on the train. I remember going in the car with my dad to pick him up at the train station in Motherwell. He was quite an imposing figure. Yeah.
I mean, he came to Elland Band when he was 78 years old. He came, and we were a 4th section band. He came out of retirement. He lived in Halifax, and he came out of retirement, and he brought he managed to convince some of his ex-players from Crossley's to come and get involved in Elland Band. So, you know, so he brought those players in. So he brought some experienced players that perhaps hadn't played for 10 years or so. So they came out of retirement. And also Elland Band at that time had got, so I'd be like 14, and I had some of my friends from school, and, you know, so there was a gang of us that were, we sort of had young and experienced. Yeah. And he was able to train us, to teach us, to put that musical inspiration in, that, you know, those foundations. We call it the basics, the fundamentals. He just rehearsed the band on stuff like that. And he was able to take, you know, we were successful in 1994. We got through the 4th section, we got to Wembley, and then by 1996 we'd reached the 2nd section, and he was like 82 then, and that's when he handed the baton over. He stepped down. But I didn't realise. I mean, I went for lessons with him, and I never heard him play a note. He never played in a lesson. He just talked me through the exercises, the and gave me lots and lots of CDs of all the old players. You know, I listened to Derek Garside, Willie Lang, you know, that era. And then, of course, there was also Philip McCann and Jim Shepherd at the same time. So he was talking to me about those players all the time. And it must have just rubbed off on me, you know, as a young player. It just did he had a bit of a way about him, because he was patient, encouraging. I went and then.
So what I'm gathering is, most of all, if we haven't got this player, we make him. Yeah. Or her.
Absolutely.
We make the player.
There's no coincidence that we've had this time and time again. I remember when we spoke to Martin Hall, and he said, if we don't have percussionists, I'll go out and I'll make some.
Yeah.
We'll make percussionists. And Sam's just said, I'll make a soprano player. Yeah. Now, there's no coincidence here that these are the proactive people whose bands, whose organisations, Chewett, Elland, are successful, right?
And thriving,
There's no magic wand. You've just got intelligent people in charge who work their socks off. And that's why it's successful. And that's why it works. And then in the background of that, you had Martin, who was taught by Jim Shepherd originally. You've got Sam with all this background in proper banding and being brought up playing the arbin and all this, the basic stuff that we know works and makes players. Yeah. There's no coincidence here, you know. This is just damn hard work and proper organisation that makes this work.
So that's how we built the band over the years. And obviously the band came up to the second section, and then, you know, eventually when we had a period, we had Jim for 3 years as our musical director, which was actually fantastic. And then of course that was handed over to Danny Brooks, and then we had 11 years with Danny to take the band up to where you know, to championship section. You know, but essentially all those young players, and we deal with so many players who are not from brass band backgrounds. The parents they're not musical, they're not banders, you know, they've just come along. The children have learned from scratch, and the parents get involved and they learn more about it and they get excited. They love to see the kids doing really well, and they see what the kids get from it, and that encourages them to give back and get more involved.
So these days, Sam, when you're recruiting raw beginners, how do you go about it? Because obviously you're saying about, you know, I had no background in brass or music or anything at school, you know. I was persuaded to do it, and it must be the same with these. How do you get these kids initially interested? Is it through peers, or once they get in, they bring their friends along, or can you explain how you sort of broaden your outreach, sort of thing?
It is a bit multifaceted, really, because you've got players involved, so you've got word of mouth. You've got people passing it on. We do a concert, people see us play, they come and ask about it. We do concerts where we're with a choir or a junior choir, and somebody from the choir might ask us about it. So you've got that side of it. Mm-hmm. But I soon realised that people don't walk in off the street and want to learn, you know. No. And so one of the things that we have done, and I've been really fortunate in my position, really, that I took redundancy, I should say, from the NHS about 15 years ago, where I had a job where I worked in contracting and commissioning and things. And I took redundancy for that, and I decided that I was going to channel all my efforts into the music. And doing that, I was able to set up some outreach work with the support of the band in the local primary schools. So the feeder schools to the band, we have 2 primary schools in Elland where I worked and I taught children, and we did small group lessons, and we taught them from scratch. We set it up so the band provided the spare instruments to the school, and then we charge a small amount, like a weekly group lesson. I think they pay £6 a lesson, and we do lessons in 2s and 3s, and they come into school, and we teach children that way. And that's really good, because they get to play in the school, they play in the assemblies at school, they get encouragement from, you know, within the school, the head, they get to take part in events and things. And then when they get to a point where they're ready to progress, we have our first access band, which we call our starter band, which is the band where the kids who can play 5 notes can sit in amongst other children and play and learn together.
You know, when I started playing, it was them small groups that really fired me up, because I thought, I'm playing with my mates here, and do you know what? We're knocking a tune out.
Yeah.
And it really pushed me on.
Is it a lot of it about that, where they're doing an activity with their friends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's getting them hooked in the social side of it and the fun. Okay. And if you can get, as you say, whether it's competitively wanting to be better than the friends, or whether it's coming out of the lesson and having that 10 minutes of blasting out Bob the Builder, or whatever it is, the tune, Baby Shark, or, you know, whatever it is the kids are excited about, blasting that out, having some fun, going back to the class. You know, it's that, if you can get that culture in the school and get the school to support that, it's really good. And then it doesn't stop there. You've got to then have the progression routes in place for the kids then to start the ensemble skills. Because as we all know, sitting down and playing alongside others, it's a whole different ball game. You know, and that's how it starts, you see. But it's working with the kids from their first lesson. And I'm really privileged with this. I get the kids in their first lesson right the way through to the kids that are doing the grade 7s and the grade 8s. You know, there's that whole system in place. So those kids grow through the organisation now. It wasn't like that when we started. It wasn't like that. It was just, you know, very basic, you know, playing simple little tunes. And I've grown with that. But, you know, it's not rocket science. You know, you look at where it's worked well. And you look at how JS Queensbury did so well. You know, Jim taught us a lot about what he did with JS and how he taught a lot of those kids in schools. And you're teaching them the discipline, the fundamentals, the, you know, how to play. And then when they come and play in a band, it's putting it all together.
That's how I remember. Sorry, Jim used to. He started Queensbury Music Centre before that. And I used to go along to South Bradford when, you know, used to bring kids from all the local area. And there were quality people coming in and teachers, Jeff Whittam, Jim, and there were some brilliant people.
Have you got any way, Sam, of, you know, tricks that you use to, any kids that are sort of, their interest is maybe waning a little bit, how do you sort of reignite a bit of passion for it, or a bit of, to get them to carry on? Because I know there must be, it's hard these days, isn't it? It is changed days. I know that. You see it with kids at school as well, attention spans and all the sort of the technology and stuff that takes them away from sort of real world a bit. How do you do any tricks that you use?
Having concerts where they can work towards something, and something that's achievable and that's interesting and exciting for them. Obviously playing in concerts with other musicians as well, so getting to see what their peers that are doing a bit older are doing and making it sound good, you know. And having things, you've got to create those opportunities, and there will be some youngsters, and there is all the time. There's some, they give it a try and it's not for them, and it doesn't matter what you convince, and it's sometimes it's so frustrating because you'll get youngsters and they'll put the mouthpiece on and they'll make it speak and they'll have a really natural way of playing, and you can't get them to engage. They're more interested in playing football or whatever, and you know, you've just got to let them go and work with the ones who are excited about it and interested, and keep moving forwards.
I know one of the things you've done, because I've been involved a little bit, where you've had little internal solo contests.
Yeah.
And I've been down to the band room to judge them on occasion and all that. And do you find that, because they're a bit of a dying event these days, aren't they?
Yeah.
Do you find those useful for developing certain aspects of people's attitudes and playing and everything else?
I mean, definitely. I mean, playing solos is not everybody's thing, is it? Not everybody gets excited about playing solos, but then there are those who do. So you can't force somebody into playing a solo that they don't want to do it. It's got to be their choice. But having the solos and having duets, you'll often find some of the kids that are a bit nervous about playing on their own, they'll play in a duet. Find that, and then a quartet or a small group, you know, they'll get, and then eventually they'll probably progress to playing a solo. But I think you kind of have to, we have to like have this, you know, it's not, one size doesn't fit everybody, does it?
No.
You know, and sometimes the kids who won't play will come along and they'll sell, you know, they'll do the raffle tickets or they'll sell the sweets at the tuck shop, and they'll get involved in a different way and they'll still get something out of it, even though they're not stood at the front playing the solo.
Yeah.
And they're supporting the mates, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, you know, playing solo playing, it's great playing solos, isn't it? And when we've got difficult pieces to play, we do need to play solos. But a big culture with us is about the band and the team, and it's not necessarily about who's the soloist. The soloist will come forward and find themselves. But I have so many kids who actually just prefer to play in the band. They just want to be in the band with the mates, safety in numbers, and having a great time.
There must have been, I mean, over the years, there must have been, I know there have been loads of tremendous highlights and stuff. Is there any sort of landmark events that stick out in your mind? Because you've been all over. I mean, you've been to the Europeans and all sorts, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've done some amazing stuff, and it's funny. I was reminiscing about this at Christmas with some of the kids some of the ex-members of the band. We were out doing something, and we were reminiscing about it. And I think that the one thing that sticks in my mind is when we won the Action Medical Research competition with Carmen. That was a bit of a landmark moment for the band. It was the first major contest that they won, and they won everything. We just cleared up. We won every trophy, and it was just one of those crazy ideas that came together, and they absolutely aced it. And it was like that sort of like, yeah, that just set the band off really, you know. That was amazing. And then obviously. We got to play at the Royal Albert Hall with the Music for Youth big festival thing.
Yeah.
That was pretty amazing. You know, actually being on stage and that was fantastic. You know, that was quite monumentous. And then obviously when we did win the Europeans in 2017, that was pretty awesome. So there's probably three things, but within that over the years, it's like, you know,
that's brilliant. I can't imagine the excitement with the kids when the coach is pulling up to the Albert Hall and things like that.
Well, I think I've talked about this before when I took Gawthorpe to the school's prom.
Yeah.
And we were downstairs and I said, right, we're going to go and have a look in the arena and just, you know what it looks like. And they were it was like taking them to the pyramids or somewhere, you know. It was like, wow, you know.
It's that thing of
amazing.
It is when you walk out on stage and you look up and you look round, and everything that you've seen on television, you know, it's like, wow, we're here. And then the sound, the way the band sounded was just amazing. It was like, it was no acoustic that I've experienced really. For such a big venue, the band felt so good and so close, and it just made us sound so, it was really, really terrific.
I bet the walk out for yourself, Sammy, is a really proud moment as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sam, I know. You're. This is a no-brainer question because I know you'll agree with this. But aside from the musical side of things, you will see these young people developing in all sorts of ways through their, you know, into their teens and onwards. This is what annoys me and frustrates me so much about the way that the education system's been just decimated in this country. Is that all of that advantage that music participation in groups like this does for people is being lost big time. And you know, kids are just becoming individuals on their phones and things, and you must see the social development as well in these kids.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, you know, if you're in a school and you're the one person carrying the suitcase to school for your lessons and your music lessons, you are a bit of an oddball. You're the odd one out. You know, there's not enough kids in schools that do music. So especially if you're a trombonist or a tuba player, or you've got to carry that instrument to school, and you're odd, you know, on the bus and everything, and people take the mick out of what you've got in your case and all that. But when they come to band, they find each other. They find you know, an acceptance and understanding, and that safety it is a safe place. It's a safe space. You can be who you want to be when you're in band, and you sit down and you play. And it doesn't matter what age you are. You can sit next to somebody in their 80s and you can be 10 years old and you can sit down and you can play. And it's a common language and understanding, and everyone just gets on together, you know. And that's, I don't think people appreciate that in music. And you can be who you want to be.
I mean, certainly successive governments over the last 20, 30 years They can't see the nose in front of their face.
No.
All of them.
And there are so many youngsters that have got neurodiverse conditions. A lot more. In this last 2 or 3 years, I'm seeing a lot more kids that are neurodiverse coming through with, whether it's dyslexia, Asperger's, dyspraxia, there are so many different neurodiverse conditions. And when you're playing a musical instrument, all of that, it doesn't matter. You get on and you learn and you play, and it's just so good. And when you see kids in that place where they can get on and they're not being judged, they just develop, they just thrive,
They do. I see it all the time at school.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I just don't understand in the slightest why the powers that be don't see the advantage of properly resourced music education. It's a lot more than just about playing an instrument. It frustrates the hell out of me, that. Sam, but unfortunately, that's where we're at.
Sam, with the youth band, how do you approach the repertoire with the various bands? Have you found, that there's certain music that they link into, or do you just try and keep it, I don't know, light?
Well, it's funny because I think it's all about how I put that music across to them. I mean, they do like playing pop music, but not all of them. Some of them dislike playing it because it doesn't sound like what they used to, So it is all about how you sell it to them and how you put it across and what the character of the music is, what the story behind the music is, what it's all about. If you sell it in the right way, you can play anything. You can play an old overture. And the kids will enjoy it. I mean, take Carmen, for instance, opera. I mean, opera is not accessible to young kids, but we approached it in a way that made it accessible for them. We got them to understand the story. We got them to understand the drama and all of that in it. And then we put some fun into it, and we put some characteristics and costumes. And suddenly they became excited about something like Carmen.
Yeah,
it's a wonderful story to tell, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's funny that because you were mentioning, I know young Edward Griffiths, Morgan's lad, plays with the band, and Morgan was telling me about his experience. He told on the podcast, I think, in Bradford, where he asked his band what they wanted to play for a certain thing, and they chose to play one of Eddie Gregson's pieces. Yeah. That was the one they liked, and he was slightly taken aback because he didn't think they would go for something as sort of I don't know, purely proper music sort of thing, as opposed to something poppy. But they did go for it because he had introduced them to that. So you're finding the same sort of thing as well.
It is. It's all. I mean, it's all about what you describe to them and what you say to them, and then when you play that music and you've explained how the music and the construction and the form and the chords and you make it interesting for them, they get it. They do like it. They don't dislike playing hymns when they can hear the nice sounds and what a beautiful, how it all comes together. And over the years, we've done the modern pieces and we've done modern test pieces. I mean, one of the pieces that the band really, really enjoyed playing, and it's going back a while, and it was Tintagel, and they loved it because we got into the story of it and we got to understand the characters, and we made the music come to life with what we were trying to achieve, so it's not just playing the notes, you're feeling it, you're putting that story and you're acting it out as you're playing it, and you're trying to make it engaging for them.
That's really interesting because it's I know this is one of my big bugbears about the music being categorized on how old or new it is. I think it's absolute garbage, that. And it's interesting that, if you can pick on a piece like that, and as long as you sell it properly, then they will take it up.
I mean, often the modern music is actually harder for them to get their heads round. And when they play the modern chords, they don't sound like you'd expect it to sound because you've got to work on those clashes and you've got to work on that balance. Yeah. Whereas if you play a chord in Gordon Langford music, or you play something in Gough Richards music, it is what it is. It sounds like it should. And if you play the more modern stuff, you have to have a different approach to that, and it's harder for the young players to get their head around that. I mean, when we did the Europeans piece, and it was the piece by Magnus Highlander, and I've forgotten the name of the piece. I should know it. But that was modern and contemporary, and it took an awful lot of work to get that piece into a good place, because when they first played it, fitting it together and getting those nuts and bolts and everything, it was really, really hard, you know.
They can't. There's not so much to hang on to there. If you're talking about something that has a more melodic sweep to it, you can tell where it's going and where you're going to fit in and all that. If it's a bit fragmented, and I can see, I understand that.
If you think, I mean, one of the classic 4-section test pieces, there's never been a better piece than Indian Summer in my book, you know,
right.
And because it's got all the elements of a test, but it's got the character behind the music. So straight away, people get that that's the totem dance. They know it, you know, and by the cool waters, you know, they get it because the music it's there. It's well written. It's full of character. And so you can adapt the way you play it to make that character come out.
It's something that comes up there and again. I mean, Sam and I, we spent time on the music panel at Capital together and stuff, and we were always talking about, in the lower sections, having a piece with a bit of a story tends to engage people a bit more, so they know what they're trying to depict, you know.
That's why Neverland was such a huge success.
Yes, exactly. Brilliant little piece.
People got it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know, I remember conductors, and this is right through my playing so-called career. Right from juniors, we had a conductor called Andy Owenson who used to stand there and tell us the story about the music. You get it in your head and you think, right, I'm depicting this. Right up to Jeff. Do you remember Jeffrey Brand's Sandy? He used to revel in telling you a story about a piece.
He was always trying to say, think about this in this way. And, you know, this is what's going on and all that. It might be a bit abstract, but he was always trying to, you were trying to depict something emotionally.
Yeah.
With it.
You know, and even if he couldn't fit a story up, he'd make one up.
Yeah, he would. Yeah, he absolutely would.
And I think it's crucial to teaching.
It's
learning how to play a piece.
We aren't just playing notes, are we? We're trying to. So we are trying to convey an emotion, a communication. We're trying to put something across. So you know, you've got to bring that out in young people. It's just teaching them to engage with it.
Sam, what's the sort of balance that you've got in the whole organisation between contests and concerts?
It's a mix. It's about so that with the youth band, they'll probably do they do the National Youth Championships, they do march contests, and then we try and do the entertainments contests like brassing concerts. So there's those 3 big things, and then there's probably the same in terms of concerts. You know, so the youth band will probably do about 10 events a year. So maybe 70% concerts, 30% contests.
So do you still do collaborative events? So for instance, the youth, I know when I see things on Facebook, that the youth band will do joint concerts with the senior band. Or do they do concerts with like choirs or other things as well?
Yeah. I mean, we have done it in the past. We've worked with local choirs. We've done concerts with our senior band, and we've done concerts with other local bands as well. You know, so that it's nice to get them out and get them introduced and seeing that there is more to this than just our band. You know, you've got to sort of put that out. I mean,
we've talked about this. Yeah. Sorry, Sam. About this idea, Simon, of collaborative concerts, because if you've got a choir and a band, you sort of double your audience potentially, or 2 organisations coming together. It's a no-brainer.
Sam, in our Christmas New Wishes and New Year's resolutions, one of the guys who we had along came up with a brilliant suggestion about adopting a local youth band structure. If you can't start your own, adopt one. What do you think to that?
Absolutely, yeah. I think, you know, it's really good for bands to reach out and engage. It might be controversial, but having a youth band, if you just get players that are already, if somebody's already done the legwork and got those kids to a certain standard, they might be your youth band, but all you're doing is working with the same kids. You're not actually encouraging, you might be developing them, and it plays a role and it plays a part in their musical development. But we have to get people starting people off from nothing, from nowhere. Yeah. That's the only way we're going to bring more people into the movement. And that could, and it doesn't just apply to kids, it applies to adults as well. There are plenty of adults who, you know, given half a chance, would love to do something that they used to do in the youth, you know, and give that a go. I mean, and that's something else we've done at Elland. We've found that there is a good cohort of people who would actually like to start and do this.
Right. It's interesting.
You can just see it all the time when you're looking through social media posts about the amount of bands that are really struggling for players. Yeah. But what gets me sometimes is you have the proactive people like Sam, and others, you know who they are, at one end of it, and then you have the other. They just sort of sit back and say, "Well, we can't find a, you know, whatever it is, a bass trombone or a percussionist or a soprano, and oh, you know, woe betide us," and all that sort of thing. But the ones that are doing the work are getting the reward.
Absolutely.
It is having a long-term plan, because for me to get a player into the youth band, it takes 5 years of development. You get, you know, 1 grade a year to get to grade 5 to be the standard of our youth band. It takes 5 years to get a player to that standard. If we're talking grade 8, which, you know, for the top section bands and above, you know, you have to have players who've probably had 10 years of experience. There's not many players that will get to that standard in 2 or 3 years.
No.
You know, you've got to be thinking that way. So if we're going to improve things and get more people playing, you've got to start people off at you know, as beginners. And so for bands to just adopt a band, that's not going to solve your problems, because it would be unfair to just assume that by adopting that youth band, you're going to get those players in your band. That would be unfair.
I think it was more from an inspirational angle than,
I
remember Brighouse having Elland band down to do a joint concert. I remember that clearly. You know, it's things like that, and that generates this interest.
They do, and they love that, and they love to sit on the front row and watch these people that they've heard names of, and you can see it written all over their face. The wow factor, you know, they are so impressed by it.
Yeah. I mean, it were things like that. I went to listen to Black Diet when I was young, and my dad used to take me to rehearsal, and I just could not wait for the next rehearsal to go and listen.
And you can't beat that. They sit down, they hear the sound, they hear the dynamics, they hear all the things that you talk about in every rehearsal, and it's there on a plate for them, and it's like
they go and practice it.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
It is. I remember about 7 or 8 years ago, I took Hebden Bridge. I was filling in at the time for them, helping out, and they had a young lad in to play on a concert, and I got chatting with him. And he'd only just been playing 6 months or something. And I says, "Oh, what you doing?" and all that. And he said, "Well, I'm in next month I'm going to a cornet class with Richard Marshall of the Black Diet Band." And he obviously had no idea who I was, which was fine. And I said, "Oh, right, so do you like Richard?" "Oh," he says, "he's my hero," he says, you know. and so what this was before the concert, we're just milling about in the sort of changing room. Anyway, I phoned Richard. Then and I caught him, and I says, "Right, mate, I've got this young lad here." I says, can you have a word with him, and just, he's coming to your class next month." He says, yeah, I'll speak to him, you know. So the band by this time were in on it. They knew I was going to give this phone to this young lad, you know.
Yeah.
So I just said, "Oh, I've got somebody on the phone for you here," you know, and I gave him the phone, and he was looking really puzzled. And then Richard started talking, and you should have seen his face. It was like he was talking to, you know, Pele or somebody, you know, or somebody, you know. He was like this superstar cornet player, and Richard's talking to him and saying, you know, "Bring this for you, and how, you know, how you doing?" and all. It was fantastic, and you forget all that, you know. These young people are just inspired by the likes of Richard, you know, because of the what he's done and the position he has and all that stuff. And it was just, it made you think, this is why we're doing it. This is the thing, you know. it's just great that these people still can be inspired. It's like you said, Sam, about you being given all these recordings by John Harrison, you know, and to listen to. And this is where we were all brought up. I mean, it does make a hell of a difference. So, Sam, anyway, you've got a big event coming up, haven't you, on the 8th of February? Can you tell us about that so that, you know, let everybody know about it?
Yeah, so it's a fantastic event. It's one that we set up about 5 years ago, just before COVID. We set it up. We set it up to take place of the Action Medical Contest, because the Action Medical Entertainments Contest at Blackpool sort of fell by the way.
Yeah.
And we felt there was something missing from the diary, but we didn't want it to be a contest. So we set up our own like brass festival where we invite half a dozen youth bands to come along to play a short set of whatever you want to play. And we all the other bands sit there, we all cheer each other, we all encourage each other. It's there to show what different bands do, basically. Yeah. And this year we've got 9 bands coming this time, actually.
Wow.
And we've got a group from the National Youth Band coming as well. So we've got an ambassador group from there. And there'll be training bands that haven't been playing very long, and then there'll be like our youth band, and then there's Shepherd Youth Band coming from York this time. So it is a case of us showing each other what we do, and each performance will be totally unique and very different. There's no rules. We're just giving them a time slot. If they want to have adult players or guest players, it's fine, so long as you guys come along, enjoy what you're doing and play your best, and just have, and you know, and Halifax Minster is an amazing space.
It's wonderful.
Really terrific.
It is great.
You know, so there'll be kids walking and they'll be wowed by the venue, and they'll have a great time. But we also do a mass bands as part of it. So we're going to have about 180 brass players all playing together. And what we do is each band chooses a piece, and then the conductor of that band conducts that in the mass bands. And then this year we've also had a new piece written for us called Band Together, by a young composer called Nick Brocklehurst that we've done quite a bit of work with Elland, and he's really good, really talented, really good. And he's written this piece called Band Together. And it's in a pop sort of upbeat style, almost like musical theatre style. So that's unique this time. And we've also been able to tap into some funding to work with Next Step Films. So we're going to make a promotional film about the festival, and it's also going to be filmed, and it'll be on the on-demand service from Next Step Films. So people will be able to watch it back. The bands will be able to watch it back and see, you know, what it all sounds like. So, you know, it's not a serious festival. It's fun. And the music that we're playing in the mass bands, we've got some great music. We've got Shotgun. We've got Shake It Off. We've got Flash Dance. These are the pieces that the bands themselves have chosen to play, and it's just light-hearted. Have a great time.
So if ever there was an event for us crusty old ones to go and lend support, that has got to be it. And
we'd love to see you there.
Yeah,
Sam, just give us the details. It's Saturday the 8th of February. Am I right in thinking 12:30 till 5?
Yeah, so it actually kicks off. The first band performance starts at 1:30, and it'll all be finished by about 5 o'clock.
It's in Halifax Minster. Yeah. Brilliant.
Tickets are £10 for adults, free for under 16s. You can buy tickets through Eventbrite, and I'm sure we can probably share the link when we share the podcast. So it's just,
we will.
Yeah, and it'll be absolute brilliant entertainment, and you will see, you know, you'll see bands just having a hoot, having a good time, enjoying performing and having something. It's not judged, there's no feedback, there's no mentor, there's no assessment of what we've done, apart from we encourage each band to applaud each other and enjoy each other's performance.
Absolutely.
That's the bit that is missing hugely in British banding at the minute, is people listening to other people.
Yeah.
And getting these kids to listen to their peers from different bands in different areas, see what they're doing and all that. Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it?
It is. I really applaud it. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
We saw the adverts for it, and shame on us. We'd not really taken much notice until we started doing this podcast. Yeah. But I implore our listeners to get along there and support you with that.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
We're certainly going to try and do that. So, Sam, if you're talking to other people who are maybe in a bit of a rut like Elland were all those years ago and they're struggling a bit, what advice would you give them to start trying to establish something that's going to help their bands survive long term?
You just got to start and teach people. Start from the beginning with people. And I know it might be difficult because if you're at a certain level and you want to stay at that level, it can be hard to get players. But if there's any way possible that you can sort of think long term, it is that worth that investment. And all you have to do is start with half a dozen. Just start with half a dozen players, be it learners, be it children, be it adults. Start with some complete beginners and just teach them. It's rewarding, it's satisfying, it's enjoyable, and you'll find that those people that you work with will want to give back. They'll help you. They'll be the people who will help sell tickets for you at a concert or give you raffle tickets, or they'll help you. It's a twofold thing.
That's wonderful.
Brilliant. Yeah. So the event in Halifax sounds tremendous. I mean, it's a real combination of things. I mean, what do you think is the benefit of doing it?
It's really about being non-competitive, not judging each other, not assessing each other, not thinking of, it's just coming along and enjoying the spirit of playing music, and appreciating each other's talents and abilities in a way that's, we're not there to threaten or judge.
Yeah. I think that sounds brilliant. We're going to have to keep an eye out for that one.
Absolutely. Moving forward with Elland Youth Band, it sounds absolutely fantastic, and something I wish I could have been involved in over the years. When I was learning, there wasn't much about, but it's the way to build a band. Without shadow of a doubt.
Folded, honestly, and the band would have folded at so many points in the past when we struggled for players, and having a player that can just come in or help out or just come for experience. This last year the band's gone through a right change this year, and it's the young players that we've got are taking those seats. They've come in, and we've promoted all around the band. We've got young players in every section again.
Yeah. And it's keeping your senior band youthful.
Yeah.
They've got mates. They've got mates in there that they can, relate to. So on behalf of Smith and Grezzy, Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you along, and we wish you all the best, and hope to see you in February at Halifax Minster. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.